Yo, what's up, everyone? I hope everybody's doing alright with this world changing and stuff. And I just want everybody to be safe and to plan out their life because nobody's serving them no more. There's no more government, there's no more money, none of that. But yeah, we got over here expressing anger fully. I just thought I might say that because you can't ignore the truth that's every day in life that people are scared of to face. But yeah, let's do this. The subject of anger gives us a unique opportunity to dive more deeply into NVC because it brings many aspects of this process into sharp focus. The expression of anger clearly demonstrates the difference between NVC and other forms of communication. I would like to suggest that killing people is too superficial. Killing, hitting, blaming, hurting others, whether physically or mentally, are all superficial expressions of what is going on within us when we are angry. If we are truly angry, we would want a much more powerful way to fully express ourselves. This understanding comes as a relief to many groups I work with that experience oppression and discrimination and want to increase their power to effect change. Such groups are uneasy when they hear the terms nonviolent or compassionate communication because they have so often been urged to stifle their anger, calm down, and accept the status quo. They worry about approaches that view their anger as an undesirable quality needing to be purged. The process we are describing, however, does not encourage us to ignore, squash, or swallow anger, but rather to express the core of our anger fully and wholeheartedly, distinguishing stimulus from cause. The first step to fully expressing anger in NVC is to divorce the other person from any responsibility for our anger. We rid ourselves of thoughts such as he, she, or they made me angry when they did that. Such thinking leads us to express our anger superficially by blaming or punishing the other person. Earlier, we saw that the behavior of others may be a stimulus for our feelings, but not the cause. We are never angry because of what someone else did. We can identify the other person's behavior as the stimulus, but it is important to establish a clear separation between stimulus and cause. I'd like to illustrate this distinction with an example from my work at a Swedish prison. My job was to show prisoners who had behaved in violent ways how to fully express their anger rather than to kill, beat, or rape with other people. During an exercise calling on them to identify the stimulus of their anger, one prisoner wrote, 3 weeks ago, I made a request to the prison office official and they still haven't responded to it. His statement was a clear observation of a stimulus, describing what the other person had done. I then asked him to state the cause of his anger. When this happened, you felt angry because what? I just told you, he claimed. I felt angry because they didn't respond to my request. By equating stimulus and cause, he had tricked himself into thinking that it was the behavior of the prison official that was making him angry. This is an easy habit to acquire in a culture that uses guilt as a means of controlling people. In such cultures, it becomes important to trick people into thinking that we can make others feel a certain way. Where guilt is a tactic of manipulation and coercion, it is useful to confuse stimulus and cause. As mentioned earlier, children who hear it hurts mom and dad when you get poor grades are led to believe that their behavior is the cause of their parents' pain. The same dynamic is observed among intimate partners. It really disappoints me when you're not here for my birthday. The English language facilitates the use of this guilt-inducing tactic. We say, "You make me angry. You hurt me by doing that. I feel sad because you did that." We use our language in many different ways to trick ourselves into believing that our feelings result from what others do. The first step in the process of fully expressing our anger is to realize that what other people do is never the cause of how we feel. So what is the cause of anger? In Chapter 5, we discussed the 4 options we have when confronted with a message or behavior that we don't like. Anger is generated when we choose the second option. However, we are angry. Whenever we are angry, we're finding fault. We choose to play God by judging or blaming other person for being wrong or deserving of punishment. I would like to suggest that this is the cause of anger. Even if we are not initially conscious of it, the cause of anger is located in our own thinking. The third option described in Chapter 5 is to shine the light of consciousness on our own feelings and needs, rather than going up to our head to make a mental analysis of wrongness regarding somebody. We choose to connect to the life that is within us. This life energy is most palpable and accessible when we focus on what we need in each moment. For example, if someone arrives late for an appointment and we need reassurance that she cares about us, we may feel hurt. If instead our need is to spend time purposefully and constructively, we may feel frustrated. If, on the other hand, our need is for 30 minutes of quiet solitude, we may be grateful for her tardiness and feel pleased. Thus, it is not the behavior of the other person, but our own need that causes our feelings. When we are connected to our need, whether it is for reassurance, purposefulness, or solitude, we are in touch with our life energy. We may have strong feelings, but we are never angry. Anger is a result of life alienating thinking that is disconnected from needs. It indicates that we have moved up to our head to analyze and judge somebody, rather than focus on which of our needs are not getting met. In addition to the third option of focusing on our own needs and feelings, the choice is ours at any moment to shine the light of consciousness on the other person's feelings and needs. When we choose this fourth option, we also never feel angry. We are not repressing the anger. We see how anger is simply absent in each moment that we are fully present with the other person's feelings and needs. All anger has a life-serving core. But I am asked, aren't there circumstances in which anger is justified? Isn't righteous indignation called for in the face of careless, thoughtless pollution of the environment? For example, my answer is that I strongly believe that to whatever degree I support the consciousness that there is such a thing as a careless action or a conscientious action, a greedy person or a moral person, I am contributing to violence on this planet. Rather than agreeing or disagreeing about what people are for murdering, raping, or polluting the environment, I believe we serve life better by focusing attention on what we are needing. I see all anger as a result of life-alienating violence, provocative thinking. At the core of all anger is a need that is not being fulfilled. Thus, anger can be valuable if we use it as an alarm clock to wake us up to realize we have a need that isn't being met and that we are thinking in a way that makes it unlikely to be met. To fully express anger requires full consciousness of our need. In addition, anger is required to get the need met. Anger, however, co-opts our energy by directing it towards punishing people rather than meeting our needs. Instead of engaging in righteous indignation, I recommend connecting empathically with our own needs or those of others. This may take extensive practice, whereby over and over again we consciously replace the phrase "I am angry because they" with "I am angry because I am needing." I once was taught a remarkable lesson while working with students in a correctional school for children in Wisconsin. On two successive days, I was hit on the nose in remarkable similar ways. The first time, I received a sharp blow across the nose from an elbow while interceding in a fight between two students. I was so enraged, it was all I could do to keep myself from hitting back. On the streets of Detroit, where I grew up, it took far less than an elbow in the nose to provoke me to rage. The second day, similar situation, same nose, and thus more physical pain, but not a bit of anger. Reflecting deeply that evening on this experience, I recognized how I had labeled the first child in my mind as a spoiled brat. That image was in my head before his elbow ever caught my nose, and when it did, it was no longer simply an elbow hitting my nose. It was that obnoxious brat had no right to do this. I had another judgment about the second child. I saw him as a pathetic creature. Since I had a tendency to worry about this child, even though my nose was hurting and bleeding much more severely, the second day I felt no rage at all. I could not have received a more powerful lesson to help me see that it's not what the other person does, but the image and interpretation in my own head that produce my anger. Stimulus versus cause. Practical implication. I emphasize the distinction between cause and stimulus on the practical and tactical as well as on philosophical grounds. I'd like to illustrate this point by returning to my dialogue with John, the Swedish prisoner. 3 weeks ago, I made a request to the prison official, and they still haven't responded to my request. So when this happened, you feel angry because what? I just told you they didn't respond to my request. Hold it. Instead of saying I feel angry because they, stop and become conscious of what you're telling yourself that makes you so angry. I'm not telling myself anything. Stop, slow down, just listen to what's going on inside. Silently reflecting, and then I'm telling myself that they have no respect for human beings. They are a bunch of cold, faceless bureaucrats who don't give a damn about anybody but themselves. They're a real bunch of blank. Think, that's enough. Now you know why you're angry. It's that kind of thinking. But what's wrong with thinking that way? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with thinking that way. Notice if I say there is something wrong with you for thinking that way. I'd be thinking the same way about you. I don't say it's wrong to judge people, to call them faceless bureaucrats, or to label their actions inconsiderate or selfish. However, it's that kind of thinking on your part that makes you feel very angry. Focus your attention on your needs. What are your needs in this situation? After a long silence, Marshall, I need the training I was requesting. If I don't get that training, as sure as I'm sitting here, I'm gonna end up back in this prison when I get out. Now that your attention is on your needs, how do you feel? Scared. Now put yourself in the shoes of a prison official. If I'm an inmate and am I more likely to get my needs met if I come to you saying, hey, I really need that training and I'm scared of what's going to happen if I don't get it? Or if I approach while seeing you as a faceless bureaucrat? Even if I don't say those words out loud, my eyes will reveal that kind of thinking. Which way am I more likely to get my needs met? John stared at the floor, remaining silent. Hey, buddy, what's going on? Can't talk about it. 3 hours later, John approached me and said, Marshall, I wish you had taught me 2 years ago what you taught me this morning. I wouldn't have had to kill my best friend. Violence comes from the belief that other people cause our pain and therefore deserve punishment. All violence is the result of people tricking themselves, as did this young prisoner, into believing that their pain derives from other people and that consequently those people deserve to be punished. One time I saw my younger son take a 50-cent piece from his sister's room. I said, Brett, did you ask your sister whether you could have that? I didn't take it from her, he answered. Now I faced my 4 options. I could have called him a liar, which would, however, have worked against my getting my needs met, since any judgment of another person diminishes the likelihood of our needs being met. Where I focused my attention at this moment was critical. If I were to judge him as lying, it would point me in one direction. If I were to interpret that he didn't respect me enough to tell me the truth, I would be pointed in another direction. If, however, I were either to empathize with him at the moment or express nakedly what I was feeling and needing, I would greatly increase the possibility of getting my needs met. The way I expressed my choice, which in this situation turned out helpful, was not so much through what I said, but through what I did. Instead of judging him as lying, I tried to hear his feelings. He was scared and his needs was to protect himself against being punished. By empathizing with him, I had the chance of making an emotional connection out of which we could both get our needs met. However, if I had approached him with the view of he was lying, even if I hadn't expressed it out loud, he would have been less likely to feel safe expressing truthfully what had happened. I would have then become part of the process. By the very act of judging another person as a liar, I would contribute to the self-fulfilling prophecy. Why would people want to tell the truth knowing they will be judged and punished for doing so? Judgments of others contribute to self-fulfilling prophecies. And we recall 4 options when hearing a difficult message: blaming others, blaming ourselves, sensing our own feelings and needs, sensing others' feelings and needs. Okay. I would like to suggest that when our heads are filled with judgment and analysis, that others are bad, greedy, irresponsible, lying, cheating, pollution of the environment, valuing profit more than life, or behaving in other ways they shouldn't, very few of them will be interested in our needs. If we want to protect the environment and we go to a corporate executive with the attitude, you know you are really a killer of the planet. You have no right to abuse the land in this way. We have severely impaired our chances of getting our needs met. It is a rare human being who can maintain focus on our needs when we are expressing them through image of their wrongness. Of course, we may be successful in using such judgments to intimidate people into meeting our needs. If they feel so frightened, guilty, or ashamed that they change their behavior, we may come to believe that it is possible to win by telling people what's wrong with them. With a broader perspective, however, we realize that each time our needs are met in this way, we not only lose, but we have contributed very tangibly to believe to violence on the planet. We may have solved an immediate problem, but we will have created another one. The more people hear blame and judgment, the more defensive and aggressive they become, the less they will care about our needs in the future. So even if our present need is met, in the sense that people do what we want, we will pay for it later. 4 steps to expressing anger. Let's look at what the process of fully expressing our anger actually requires in a concrete form. The first step is to stop and do nothing except to breathe. We refrain from making any move to blame or punishment the other person. We simply stay quiet, then we identify the thoughts that are making us angry. For example, we overhear a statement that leads us to believe that we've been excluded from a conversation because of race. We sense anger, stop and recognize the thoughts stirring in our head. It's unfair to act like that. She's being racist. We know that all judgments like these are tragic expressions of unmet needs. So we take the next step and connect to the needs behind those thoughts. If I judge someone to be racist, the need may be for inclusion, equality, respect, or connection. To fully express ourselves, we now open our mouths and speak the anger, but the anger has been transformed into needs, and needs connected feelings. To articulate these feelings, however, may be required a lot of courage. For me, it's easy to get angry and tell people that was a racist thing to do. In fact, I may even enjoy saying such things, but to get down to the deeper feelings and needs behind such a statement may be very frightening. To fully express our anger, we may say to the person, when you entered the room and started talking to the other person and didn't say anything to me, and then made the comment about white people, I felt really sick to my stomach and got so scared. It triggered off all kinds of needs of my part to be treated equally. I'd like you to tell me how you feel when I tell you this. Step to expressing anger. Stop, breathe. Identify our judgmental thoughts, connect with our needs, express our feelings and unmet needs. Offering empathy first. In most cases, however, another step needs to take place before we can express the other party to connect with what is going on in us, because it will often be difficult for others to receive our needs and feelings in such situations. We would need first to empathize with them if we want them to hear us. The more we empathize with what leads them to behave in the ways that are not meeting our needs, the more likely it is that they will be able to reciprocate afterwards. Over the last 30 years, I've had a a wealth of experience speaking NVC with people who harbor strong beliefs about specific races and ethnic groups. Earlier one morning, I was picked up by a cab at an airport to take me into town. A message from a dispatcher came over the loudspeaker for the cabbie: pick up Mr. Fishman at the Synagogue on Main Street. The man next to me in the cab muttered, "These kikes get up early in the morning so they can screw everybody out of their money." For 20 seconds, there was smoke coming out of my ears. In earlier years, my first reaction would have been to want to physically hurt such a person. Now I took a few deep breaths and then gave myself some empathy for the hurt, fear, and rage that were stirring inside of me. I attended to my feelings. I stayed conscious that my anger wasn't coming from the fellow passenger nor the statement he had just made. His comment had triggered off the volcano inside of me, but I knew that my anger and profound fear came from a fear far deeper source than those words he had just uttered. I sat back and simply allowed the violent thoughts to play themselves out. I even enjoyed the image of actually grabbing his head and smashing it. Giving myself this empathy enabled me to then focus my attention on the humanness behind his message. After which the first words out of my mouth were, "Are you feeling?" I tried to empathize with him to hear his pain. Why? Because I wanted to see the beauty in him and for him to fully apprehend what I had experienced when he made this remark. I knew I wouldn't receive that kind of understanding if there was a storm brewing inside of him. My intention was to connect with him and to show a respectful empathy for the life energy in him that was behind the comment. My experience told me that if I were able to empathize, then he would be able to hear me in return. It would not be easy, but he would be able to. "Are you feeling frustrated?" I asked. "It appears that you might have had some bad experience with Jewish people." He eyed me for a moment. "Yeah, these people are disgusting. They'll do anything for money." You feel distrust and the need to protect yourself when you're involved in a financial affairs with them. "That's right," he exclaimed, continuing to release more judgments as I listened for the feelings and needs behind each one. When we settle our attention on other people's needs and feelings, we express our common humanity. When I hear that he's scared and wants to protect himself, I recognize how I also have a need to protect myself. And I too know what it's like to be scared. When my consciousness is focused on another human being's feelings and needs, I see the universality of our experience. I had a major conflict with what went on in his head, but I've learned that I enjoy human beings more if I don't hear what they think, especially with the folks who had his kind of thoughts. I've learned to save your life much more by only hearing what's going on in their hearts and not getting caught up with the stuff in their heads. This man kept on pouring out his sadness and frustration. Before I knew it, he'd finished with Jews and moved on to blacks. He was minutes of my After nearly 10 minutes of my just listening, he stopped. He had felt understood. Then I let him know what was going on in me. "You know, when you first started to talk, I felt a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, sadness, and discouragement because I've had different experiences with Jews than you've had, and I was wanting you to have much more kind of experience I've had. Can you tell me what you heard me say? Oh, I'm not saying that you're all. Excuse me? Hold on. Can you tell me what you heard me say? Man said, what are you talking about? Let me repeat what I'm trying to say. I really want you to just hear the pain I felt when I heard your words. It's really important to me that you hear that I was saying I felt a real sense of sadness because my experience with Jewish people have been very different. I was just wishing that you had some experience that were different from the ones you were describing. Can you tell me what you heard me say? You're saying I have no right to talk the way I did. No, I would like you to hear me differently. I really don't want to blame you. I have no desire to blame you. I intend to slow down the conversation because in my experience, to whatever degree people hear blame, they have failed to hear our pain. If this man said, those were terrible things for me to say, those were racist remarks I made, he would not have heard my pain. As soon as people think that they have done something wrong, they will not be fully apprehending our pain. People do not hear our pain when they believe they are at fault. End quote. Our need is for the other person to truly hear our pain. When we hear the other person's feelings and needs, we recognize our common humanity. When more we hear them, the more they'll hear us. Stay conscious of the violent thoughts that arise in our minds without judging them. I didn't want him to hear blame because I wanted him to know that he had gone on in my heart when he uttered his remark. Blaming is easy. People are used to hearing blame. Sometimes they agree with it and hate themselves, which doesn't stop them from behaving the same way. And sometimes they hate us for calling them racist or whatever, which also doesn't stop their behavior. If we sense blame entering their mind, as I did in the cab, we may need to slow down, go back and hear their pain for a while more. Taking our time. Probably the most important part of learning how to live the process we have been discussing is to take our time. We may feel awkward deviating from the habitual behaviors that our conditioning has rendered automatic, but if our intention is to consciously live life in harmony with our values, then we'll want to take our time. A friend of mine, Sam Williams, jotted down the basic components of this process on a 3x5 card, which he would use as a cheat sheet at work. When his boss would confront him, Sam would stop, refer to the card in his hand, and take time to remember how to respond. When I asked whether his colleagues were finding him a little strange, constantly staring into his hand and taking so much time to form his sentence, Sam replied, "It doesn't actually take that much more time, but even if it did, it's still worth it to me. It's important for me to know that I am responding to people the way I really want to." At home, he was more overt, explaining to his wife and children why he was taking the time and trouble to consult the card. Whenever there was an argument in the family, he would pull out the card and take his time. After a month, he felt comfortable enough to put it away. Then, one evening, he and Scotty, age 4, were having a conflict over television, and it wasn't going well. "Dad," Scotty said urgently, "get the card." For those of you wishing to apply NVC, especially in challenging situations of anger, I would suggest the following exercise. As we have seen, our anger comes from judgment, labels, and thoughts of blame, of what people should do and what they deserve. List the judgments that float most frequently in your head by using the cue. I don't like people who are blank. Collect all such negative judgments in your head, then ask yourself, when I make that judgment of a person, what am I needing and not getting? In this way, you train yourself to frame your thinking in terms of unmet needs rather than in terms of judgment of other people. Practice is essential because most of us were raised, if not on streets of Detroit, then somewhere only slightly less violent. Judging and blaming have become second nature to us. To practice NVC, we need to proceed slowly, think carefully before we speak, and often just take a deep breath and not speak at all. Learning the process and applying it both take time. Practice translating each judgment into an unmet need. Summary: blaming and punishing others are superficial expressions of anger. If we wish to fully express anger, the first step is to divorce the other person from any responsibility for our anger. Instead, we shine the light of consciousness on our own feelings and needs by expressing our needs. We are far more likely to get them met than by our judging, blaming, or punishing others. The 4 steps to expressing anger are: 1. Stop and breathe. 2. Identify our judgmental thoughts. 3. Connect with our needs. And 4. Express our feelings and unmet needs. Sometimes in between some of that, he or she will be better able to hear us when we express ourselves in step 4. We need to take our time in both learning and applying the process of NVC. And we made it to the end of the chapter. So we got that chapter 11 that I plan to be reading for everybody. And I hope everybody just takes the time slowly to apply this beautiful knowledge and to change your life. I love you all, and I'll see you later, man.